Come on, let me hear, let's get louder. It is time for Dog Encounter.
Dog Encounter is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Extreme caution is advised.
Come on, Counter-Strike. Come on, Counter-Strike. Come on, Counter-Strike. Come on, let me hear, let's get louder. Welcome to Dog Encounter. Come on, let me hear, let's get louder.
Welcome to Dog Encounter.
So I don't know if it's good news or bad news, but we will talk about it and then we'll upload it after the announcement. Thing is, I was coming in today knowing, I reckon I was 95% positive on who Liquid's AWP is going to be. And I also know who the fifth at G2 is. And it's like, you know, I thought we were just going to sit here for an hour and a half talking around in circles. And I don't know what else we could talk about. What else could we have spoken about today that would have been of any level of excitement? Does anybody have anything?
No.
Yeah, like
You did sound, Jason, like you had something like ready, but you were just trying.
I did. I was gonna drop a little troll, and then I was like, you know what? It's just not even worth it. Not even.
Well, we could have, I guess, spoken about the HooXi benching, right?
Yeah,
And
there's the
then
HooXi
that-
benching, but I mean, like, it's
that's
kind
its
of
whole
like the
thing as
last
well.
week episode. Is it feels like we've just been talking about that for like 4 weeks in anticipation of it happening.
All we've been talking about is roster changes.
Potential
I'm fucking
roster
fed up
changes,
at talking.
not even
yeah,
actual
I'm
roster
over
changes.
it. So I understand we don't have any Counter-Strike at the moment, so it makes it a little bit more difficult, right? We don't actually have a lot that we can talk about because there aren't any games on. There's not even a whole lot happening in terms of news coming out about future tournaments or the structure for next year or anything. Valve is still doing the occasional update, which is nice. I've been messaging them about the boost bug, and they've been asking me to send them like demos or if I get clips of it. So every time one of those situations seems to crop up, I send it to them. So hopefully they can work out how to fix that. But other than that, like nothing's even happening in my day to day. I don't even have any fun stories. Like literally nothing has happened since last time we did an episode. I couldn't even make anything up if I tried.
This is that part of like the player break where it's always like the last like 2 weeks of the event circuit or last like event, you're just kind of like, oh, I could use this fucking break. I could really use just some time off. I can't wait to relax. And then you get into the break and you're like, holy fuck, what am I supposed to do? And there's no Counter-Strike. Like
I'm enjoying the relaxing. I just mean I got nothing to talk about. Like we have stuff to talk about, but there's nothing. It's just the same shit. It's just this roster change or that roster change or what. Look, do we just get into it or do we keep fluffing the audience for as long as we can?
Did we have the Malbs info at the last episode? No, right?
Not
think so,
confirmed, but it wasn't like
pretty much
announced that he
confirmed.
was joining, but I think it was pretty. We were talking as if he was in G2.
Yeah.
And I think we were like, I mean, we always talked about there was most likely like there's going to be one more change, right? Like it would make no sense for Malbs to just come in and play Nexus roles, right? Like, so I think the obvious one was HooXi being replaced, and then is Nico going to be IGL or are they getting an IGL and then we theory craft about the whole G2 thing? But yeah, I think we might as well just dive straight into it because
Wait, before we say it, Yanko, let's do this. I want to do this. I want to see what the thoughts are before we like mention the name. So when you heard who it was going to be, what was your initial like thought, right? I'm not saying just like put a one word on it, but if you could encapsulate it to like, you know, a couple of sentences or something, what was your initial thought when you heard who it was? Me too.
That was my initial reaction, basically. You know, I have the feeling for G2, unfortunately, is like they've been trying to like moneyball this thing for a little while now. And I don't think that's the way to go. You know, with the players that they have, they just needed to really commit and get some big names because it's nothing where it like you don't get excited for it. Like it's nothing where you're going to be like, oh shit, like that's going to be sick. It fits in perfect. All that sort of stuff. You're like, well, this could be better. This could be worse. This could be the same. Like I don't have a lot of reason to believe it's going to be a massive improvement. You know.
What did you think, Jason?
Well, I mean, you guys just told me the name like 30 seconds before we went live, and I just kind of started laughing. Well, I think the bummer of it is like, I saw Thorne's tweet as well, like maybe like 30 minutes ago, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. So this was just kind of like now I get it. It sucks because like I kind of woke up today and it was, for whatever reason, one of the first thoughts on my brain when I was laying in bed, and I was like, I kind of like this whole G2 situation at the moment because like Malb's coming in. I'd said like during the last episode, like they seem to be in like this window of opportunity to really like swing for the fences and set themselves up. And I don't know, this fifth feels like it's not in that vein. Malbs felt like they were playing with that kind of a philosophy. They get like a young player who's just like an emerging star, still full of potential. You get to add him in, and that could be a good player for you for the next 3 to 5 years as he continues to get better and more experience. And that's a nice long-term choice. And then I was like, this last one could just like really seal it. Like G2 could be fucking sick. And I'm with Yanko. It's kind of like it's like, It feels similar to the Nexa for JKS, where it's like,
You think it's a lateral move?
That was worse. Like that one was worse, but it's in that region.
Right. Like it just feels like
I have so many.
Maybe you get some benefits, but I don't know if it's like enough to like push the performance that much higher.
Well, look, I have so many qualms with it, and it's not because of the player. It's because I had told myself that this is the turning of the page for like Nico, and he's going to pursue this, and he's getting into his late 20s, be entering the early 30s. This would be a great time. He's still very mechanical. We saw the team have the trust of him to do it over there in Dallas, where they lifted the trophy, so there's faith in that regard. And also from an organizational standpoint, to make sure that the team is ironclad for the future by bringing in somebody who's under the age of 25, right? Another individual who's going to be around within the team of G2 for a couple of years. So the fact that they've gone with an in-game leader and they've gone with someone who's 30, right, tells me that they think with this addition, they're doing this to win now. Right, and that isn't for us to restart the whole conversation of, oh yeah, how late can you play? Like, what age can you continue to grind until? Or is it just things in life that are going on that take you away? That's not to start that whole conversation. It's just that the best Counter-Strike players in the world right now are all under the age of 25, right? We've got Zywi, we've got m0NESY, we've got Donk, right? These young kids who have the intuition, right? Counter-Strike for them is just second nature at the moment with CS2. They're not sitting there worrying about the fact that the mechanics are different. They're not bitching and moaning about it. They're just fucking getting on with it. And I thought you have m0NESY, you bring Malbs in. He's someone who can definitely be an aggressive space taker like Nico, right? They're both quite aimy heavy. You have those two to fill that role. You have Hunter, who is very experienced, and he can play either more anchory, or he can play lurky, or he can play aggressive if he has to. He can do whatever the team needs of him, and he's a good level-headed person to have in the squad. And then you get yourself an anchor that's on the market, and I heard that the Perfecto buyout is in like $500,000 or more or something crazy, right? So G2 we're never going to spend that type of money on getting somebody like Perfecto, which sucks because I think maybe if they could, maybe they wouldn't have gone in the route that they did. And again, this isn't to like be nagging on the person, the in-game leader that they've picked to go with here on G2. I just thought, like I believed in my heart of hearts that they were going in a new direction with the team. So when I heard the news, I was like, oh, mate, like it feels like a missed opportunity. And it might not be a missed opportunity. It could all work out. But then I have to try and piece this together and go, okay, so Nico still doesn't want an in-game lead, but they've now brought in somebody who isn't one of the best in-game leaders in the world into this team. They just brought another name into this mix. How many of these names have they gone through in the last, I guess it's, like, I don't know. Should the in-game leader be the piece that's getting changed the most within an organization, or is that what you want to build around? I don't fucking know. Either way, I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not underwhelmed. I'm not even whelmed.
You can't build around this particular in-game leader. And I guess this is about the time where Yanko, why don't you?
No, Chad, you have the honors because you said you knew it first.
Yeah, I knew yesterday. And the fifth that everybody who will be listening to this will already know because we will release it after the announcement is Snacks. So there you go, everybody, from Gamer Legion. He only recently took over in-game leading. He did it a little while back with Let Us Cook, doing it with international and Polish type mixers, and then goes to Gamer Legion. He had been there since September. He's a multi-time top 20 player, but that ended
major champion.
He's a major champion. And now the most fun thing for me to actually talk about with this change is not how the roles are going to stack up or how are they going to work it all out, because for me, they had their opportunity to find something a little bit more perfect and now they fucked it, but whatever, is Snacks and Taz.
Yeah.
Dude, does anyone put a lot of stock? Has anyone felt like Snax' IGL of Gamer Legion was kind of like, okay, like he's putting it together. He's solid IGL.
How much do you attribute to Ash? That's the big question. That right there is the question for me as far as Gamer Legion are concerned. How much do you put stock in Ash of being the reason that Gamer Legion, even when changing even when changing in-game leader from Shui to Snacks, how much do you put on Ash's back of them being a strong tactical unit, right? That's the question.
I put a decent amount of stock in Ash. I think he's a relatively underrated coach. I don't know exactly what he's been doing, but just when you look at his YouTube content or you chat with him at an event, he seems like he's got his head on his shoulders. And obviously we can't ever know like what percentage is him and what percentage is Snacks, but I give Ash a good amount of credit for how that team played and kind of held up despite some roster changes over the years. I guess I don't really rate Snacks yet as an IGL. I don't know where to put him.
But I think that's exactly what it is. It's like, that's why your reaction when you hear this change is like, here's what's bothering me to some extent, right? So if you're looking like, in G2, okay, they added an IGL, meaning Nico didn't want to IGL right now,
Yeah.
So you need to get someone else. So it's like, did he not want to IGL right now and that's just it? Or does he not plan to stay like in G2 for much longer and then he doesn't want to do it for a shorter period of time or whatever? And then if you're G2, if like you're thinking that's going to happen, is like, so is this your in-game leader for the future? Like, why do you bench HooXi then? For just
I think HooXi's faith was gone, right?
What?
There was no faith left in HooXi within the team, I don't think.
Maybe that could be the reason. I'm just thinking it's like, okay, so you brought Snacks over. Is he like going to be, no matter if whatever, Nico, Hunter, Monacy, whatever happens to them, whether they stay on the team after the major or some of them leave or you want to replace some of them, whatever. Snacks is your guy for the long term as an IGL. Like, okay, Malbs as a player, sure. Like, he's young, he has upside, he has potential, all of that stuff. It just seems like a little bit from a team building side, it's kind of, okay, so what are you going to do if some of your stars want to leave after next season, right? If you don't have the results, what's going to happen to the team? Like, I feel like by them not being apprehensive enough about the roster and thinking like longer term, they might be in a really like tough spot down the line,
Well, what do you think about the sentiment that I expressed of they're doing this because they think that they have the capacity to win now, right? That's what it seems like to me, because Snacks is 30. He's not that deep into his tenure as an in-game leader at this level. But I would say that he has a higher fragging capacity than HooXi.
Yes.
So there's a positive there. I don't know what to make of it. Like it just exists. It's a change that's happened, and I'm not.
Here's the problem. Like, yes, they can win now, right? Snacks is individually a better player than HooXi, but I think there's role overlap, like in certain positions. It's not like completely that some player has to change his style completely, but it's on one map, it's one guy. On another map, it's a different guy to make it all work, right? So you're bringing a new IGL who's going to supposedly, have his way of approaching the game or whatever. And I think without a doubt at this point, Ash is a better coach than Taz is, despite the resume of Taz, as a player and whatnot. So, how much of it was Snacks, how much of it was Ash, we'll have to wait and see, and time will tell in G2. But there's going to be a lot of work for them, to kind of figure it out and to see how they want to do things and to make everything work. Then you have Malbs on a first like massive team on the big stage on a team like with as much spotlight on them as G2. How is he going to handle that? Like, that's the problem. It's very difficult to predict how this is going to work, because here's the two ways you can look at it, right? Okay, they bring Snax, who's a better individual player, right? And also experienced and whatnot. He had that little stint in Mouse. You know, we've seen that with Nico calling and with a stand-in, they were able to lift a trophy. So maybe it's not about that, oh, Nico would be a much superior caller to Snax and whatnot. I think it's more about how you set up your game, right? And how do you want to approach the game. I think it's the reason for their success, if we're going to simplify it in Dallas, was playing a little bit more loose and allowing a little bit more slow and allowing players room and time to make moves, right? And Nico played better individually. Monacy was incredible. Hunter stepped up in the playoffs and they went on and won the trophy. Like, and they could still do... Yeah, of course. And they could still do that on paper, right? And Malbs, if he can, handle everything well and keep playing on the level we saw at times in M80, all of a sudden you've upgraded individually on both positions, right? Like in terms of players, you have two better individual players. So if those little role adjustments that they need to make, or positional adjustments that they need to make, if that doesn't create, if that doesn't cause the level of players to drop off significantly, all of a sudden it can work. But then the flip side of that is, well, maybe it's going to be a mess in the calling department, right? Maybe these players just can't get adjusted to new positions. It's going to take them a lot of time to get on the same page about how they want to play, yada, yada, yada. And it becomes a disaster. They're even worse than they were, in the first half of the year.
I've kind of like three general thoughts on this, and I guess first, Chad, to kind of address your angle about like the philosophy of thinking they can win now. I think that's actually a really dangerous philosophy for G2 to have. If you want to talk about, one thing about that Dallas win that kind of came out was just like the feeling like G2 was playing without pressure. And I think all of a sudden, if you make this roster change now and say, let's get this guy because we're in a position where we can win right now, we don't need some like beast mode, whatever, we're in a position and ready to go. I think you're adding pressure onto yourself. And if those results don't come in immediately, it's just going to build that pressure. And then you're kind of right back where you started with HooXi, where it feels like every tournament you go in, you're expected to win and you have to meet these expectations, and you have just frustration mounting when you aren't meeting them.
I don't agree with that. I think it's more in a sense of, not necessarily they'll say that, and that will be like, it's just, how for some teams we say, well, they have, this young player and he's going to need 6 months to get, and you give them like sort of excuses. You're willing to give them some time, like we did for Liquid, for example. It's like, okay, we don't expect anything from them for 6 months because this, that, and whatnot, right? For G2, it doesn't seem that way. Like, those obstacles aren't really they don't really exist outside of setting the game up and setting the roles and positions up with these players, right? And then just having some time to practice and get used to each other, which is realistically 2 months. You should be able to do that by the time the RMRs come around, right? Like for the major, that's enough time to get there. If it can work, it will show by then, and if no, it will also show by then.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in general, if you're a team that has someone like Nico and then the best player in the world, you don't really get those passes all that much. You might get them like the first time around, but those are going to disappear really quick. People are going to expect results. But I think too, like the next point would be, I think if you're bringing Snax in, like there's no way for me to rationalize this pickup without saying that Taz had a really heavy hand and influence in this kind of process and kind of sticking up for his former teammate. In which case,
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason. I just want to say, didn't they have a strained relationship?
Yeah, towards the end of that tenure, but I mean, time heals those wounds. And I think, I have to imagine Taz is maybe looking at this a little bit differently now than when they were teammates, and looking at what he can offer and remembering all the positives that Snax can bring to a team. So I mean, this is speculation. I would imagine that Taz had a big hand, and if that issue is still there between the two of them, I cannot imagine Taz, the coach, signing off on this move if him and Snack still have some kind of beef between them that's going to prevent them from working together. So I have to assume that both of them have kind of told G2 and told the players and worked it out and said we can actually work together and we're good at working together and this is going to work great. But you add in, you all of a sudden put on Taz, the veto fiasco at the major, and now you have him bringing in Snacks, a former teammate who, again, speculating and assuming that he had a pretty heavy hand in sticking up for Snacks as a player and as an IGL. This is kind of
where does that
Taz's
assumption come from?
It's just the fact that they were former teammates and they played together, and that's where I'm basing this assumption off of for sure. But I would say that puts a lot of pressure on Taz to actually deliver as a coach in terms of you have to start showing that you can do things as a coach and you can work with this IGL. And all of a sudden, if you have the major veto fiasco and then you have an IGL that comes in that's a former teammate that you stumped for that doesn't pan out and doesn't work, I think Taz is going to be on the hot seat just as well if Snacks doesn't pan out. I think he's going to be right there with him, and we're going to start talking about G2 looking at different coaches.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I, for me, and I don't know, I could be completely off base, right? But I would have hoped that the management would have explored the idea of having Nico in-game lead and then looked for a strong anchor. Because if they could have gotten an anchor along the lines of a Perfecto and Nico was going to in-game lead, then you think about the individual prowess across the board in that team, or at least the ceiling of individual prowess across the board in that team. And I'm not saying that it would have, 100% worked, because we've had discussions about super teams in recent history, like the Cloud9 roster that formed last year that was just absolute dog water, right? They fucking sucked. But the idea of that being the potential and then the future for the team with Nico taking over in-game leadership duties, a younger anchor alongside Amonacy and Malbs, who are also going to be Counter-Strike players for the better part of the next decade, that would have been a better future-proofing idea for this team. Whereas and like I said, I hope they had that discussion about it being the case, but then that would lean to Nico saying that he probably doesn't want to do it. And then to get Snacks from Gamer Legion, I don't know how long of a contract he would have signed when he initially joined them. But as I said, he joined in September of last year. So we're already in July. So we're quickly chasing down the fact, and let's assume that he signed at the end of June or early July. Well, would have been a couple of months left on the contract if it was only a year-long contract. Because if you were Gamer Legion and you were signing Snacks, would you have even signed him to a long-term contract? I don't imagine you would have, especially because you were taking a gamble with the type of online teams that he was playing with, and he was doing the in-game leadership role. So I feel this is, okay, well, we can have someone who's going to lead, who is going to frag better than HooXi, who isn't going to cost us that much money compared to we have to fork out a shitload of money to get a strong anchor. What, worth a lot of money?
No, frag better than HooXi.
I would imagine so. HooXi towards the tail end was absolutely abysmal, mate. Whereas at least at one point in Snacks' career, he's been a star player. You would never say that for HooXi, right? Snacks actually, knows what is necessary to be a player to contribute in the fragging department. And if they put him in, and that's the next thing of like the roles, how are they going to balance this out? Because it needs to be Malbs and Nico as your space takers. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. Those two have the best aim on the team, right? And you're already going to have Amonacy who's aggressive on the AWP as well. So that means that Snacks is going to have to take a back seat in some of these. And I was just going through Skybox Edge looking at different positions he's playing. There's a big overlap with a lot of players prefaced in the squad. And I hope that they don't sign somebody of the capacity of Malbs and then neuter him before they even fucking start playing by putting him in anchor roles and just going, hey, bro, you're going to completely change the way you approach the game now, because that would be fucking dumb. So I don't know what's going to come out of this, but I just think, for me, this doesn't feel like a long-term decision. That's why I lean to they're going to try and win in the short term. And they have the potential to, especially considering the influx nature of Counter-Strike at the moment. There isn't really a top dog. If this just makes... let me throw you this one. We all know what G2's best map is, right? Or at least we know what we think G2's best map is. Inferno. What map did Gamer Legion not play? Inferno. Cool. Anyone think of that?
Yeah.
I think cool, man.
Yeah, I think the whole Nico like in-game leading situation and whatnot. I think like if you look where he's at, like what's the one thing he's missing in his career? It's trophies, major. Right? Yeah, major and just trophies in general a little bit. I mean, the Katowice and Cologne one were huge. So it's like, how do you best get to that. Is like, and I think for Nico he's definitely going to switch to in-game leading at some point, but it's like, as long as I feel like I can dominate as a player, I don't want to be doing that. Like when I feel like
Yeah,
I
it makes
can't,
sense.
right? So, and where's he at right now when it comes to that? I think he is figuring it out because he's had really good tournaments and games, but it's been a struggle at the start of the year. I don't think there's any hiding that, right? No one is disillusioned with that, him included. So I think it's a situation where he would probably like a bigger sample size, to be able to see, okay, can I still maintain that level? And if you can, then you don't want to switch to in-game leading. Why would you, right? Like, even if you look at someone like Apex, it happened once he was falling off as an individual player and was most likely going to lose his spot on a tier 1 team because of it, right? So then the question is like, okay, so can I have a team where I can just be a player, but where the team is good enough to win championships? And I think the answer to that is yes, but whether that team is G2, that's something that you are, not necessarily sure about, especially with this roster. So then you're like, okay, this is the changes that the team made. This is the roster that we have. Let's see if we can win or not. And then if it doesn't end up working after this season, then I think we've also seen that. I mean, we were saying 3 weeks ago that, when we were expecting or hoping for just roster mania, right? Like, because it felt like a lot of teams need some changes and maybe we get some crazy transfers. Nothing of that happened. It was the complete opposite. It's one of the most boring ones, really, which tells you that the next one after the major is probably going to be
crazy,
massive, right? So, and that people are almost like waiting that out, like just kind of sticking with what they have. We talked about the cutoff point for the invites, RMRs, qualifiers, and whatnot. So I think that's when you could expect some of those tectonic shuffles, right? And I think that's why you're not seeing. I think even if G2 came, like what we talked about last episode on whenever, and said to Nico, listen, like, we'll give you whatever you want. We want you and Monacy to be the pillars of G2 Counter-Strike for the end of this decade, right? We want you to lead it. We want you to captain it. We're bringing, whatever, Mal, and we'll bring Perfecto. Let's say they shell out for Perfecto. If that was the choice, doesn't matter. I don't think he would have said yes still. Like, even if the team was that good, I just don't think like that's what he wants to commit to at this moment. So then if you're G2, then it becomes more difficult for you. So, okay, now we need an IGL because HooXi kind of, we feel like, has to go. The way the season was unsuccessful, probably some like internally, lack of faith, like you guys have said. So, but who's out there?
Winning without, yeah, exactly. Who's out there?
And
right?
who's out there, right? Who
get?
could you get? And we were saying like, bro, it's dry out there. I mean, who could you get? Right? Someone even asked in the chat about Glaive. I said, I don't think it fits like that much stylistically, and whatnot. So yeah, I think it would have been tough. And I don't think there was a name out there that could have wowed us, or that we could have been like, oh yeah, that's actually really nice, because that's just where the market is at the moment.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think
unless it was like Carrigan,
yeah, that would have been sick. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the biggest announcements I'd want to see out of G2, like the biggest weight they can take off their shoulders is I want to see like an announcement of like signing Nico to a new contract, signing Modesty to a new contract. And that's where I think this play is like scary. Like I would agree with that point. There's not a whole lot of other options out there that are going to like blow your socks off in any way for an IGL. But does this feel like a signing that's going to like convince Nico or Monacy to stick around to sign a new contract to be there for the long term?
No, I don't think so. And I think also,
don't you hold all the cards if you're Nico and Monacy anyway?
Maybe. Yes, because also like if you're thinking about, okay, which team could you win the most, or where, what are the options? I mean, obviously Falcons are there, right? Like they're always going to be there with the amount of money that they have. So in a hypothetical, right, because it was already rumored last year that he was supposed to go there, right? Imagine if Falcons at the end of this year go and get Nico and Monacy. Like if they just come and pay, because they can they can pay. Like, it's going to cost a lot. And also G2 can say whatever they want at that point when it's been over a year. Is like, you can't like keep players chained to your team, especially when you haven't done everything in your power to make them happy and to like build a proper roster. I think with some of the roster moves and the lineups that they've put together, like, that's enough of an excuse for whatever m0NESY and Nico to be like, hey, I mean, you know, we deserve, if they are willing to pay, we deserve to be let go. Because if you're those two players and you can go to Falcons and it's like, I don't know, Magisk is there, and then
you would even if you just said Magisk was there and you have Magisk, Nico, m0NESY, you could easily pad out around that and you'd have a better team than you have.
Yeah,
right
if
now.
you want to keep Snappy as an IGL and whatever, and whoever you want to be your like fifth player, you have Zonic there as the coach, right? You have all the support that you could possibly need, right? Like, then that's a good option for them, you know. But that's like going way down the line.
Can I ask this question? Do you think this roster change is egregious as the Nexa roster change? Like, the Nexa one was never good. Anybody who tried to make an argument for it making any sense is watching Counter-Strike with blinders on, right? Do you think this is an egregious move, or do you think this is just one, like, because the way that you're explaining it just there, Yanko, was the sense of, well, the market's pretty dry at the moment and Nico doesn't want to do this yet, so they had to get somebody.
I think it's I think it's the same area, just not as egregious for those reasons.
No, I don't. I think it's. Yeah,
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine, because the problem is, like, when you're changing
it's not
an
exciting,
anchor,
but it's fine.
you're changing an anchor, there's always options, man. Like, there's always some options out there, because you could either spend some money and get a player that's, you know, proven and in the role and already on a tier 1, tier 2 team, or you could even get a younger player who's just, you know, on the way up and incredibly skilled for cheaper and sort of take a little bit of a gamble on how he will pan out.
Or you
right?
could have
Instead, you get a guy who's known, but who's also he doesn't have the strength like that you're looking for. It's actually one of the most egregious, like, you know, moves that a tier 1 team has made. G2 was like what the top 3 team in the world, right? When they've sort of made this change, it's like, it's wild. They won Katowice and Cologne, like 2 of the biggest events outside of
and the World Finals. They won like the 3 biggest tournament events outside of the majors.
Yeah, you know, so I don't think this is anywhere near it. I don't think there's like, you could be and point out, oh, there's so many other people they could have gone for that would have been much better. I think it will be easy to say 6 months from now, but at this moment, it's just like you just can't know how it's going to pan out. And I think also, just looking at some of the lineups in the past, I mean, it's been a little bit rough. It's been a little bit of a theme for G2 when it comes to like moves and whatnot, because their best roster was, and here's the thing also, because I tell you, HooXi has proven himself capable of winning tier 1 trophies. Absolutely, because they did win them. And then people say, oh yeah, but you have like when Nico and m0NESY are on fire and whatnot. Yes, but that's like, look at a lot of these other teams, right? Kerrigan with Rops and Rain and Brokey and Twists, right? I mean, it's all 4 players. You look at when Boomage was the IGL of Navi, that was when you had Simple and Electronic on the team. Apex, obviously, with Vitality with Zaiwu in there, and Magisk and Spinks, right? Like, you could say the same thing for that's how teams are really built in a way. Why? Because you need to have someone who's going to be sacrificing themselves probably more than other people just in game, and then also someone who's going to, surrender a good amount of their mental capacity for the team to not focus so much on the crosshair, but more about what the team is going to do. And that's the trade-off you make, and that's fine. Like, when you have the right pieces around it, and G2 has had that with the JKS roster, right? Even after Cologne, it was, Gamers 8, could have gone differently and whatnot. The major was, really bad, and I don't want to go through it all again, but I think that's the point. Like, if you get someone else, then you have other players on the team who take a massive amount of space. So you have to have someone there who's going to do the dirty work.
Yeah, this obviously always opens up more conversation, right? Because HooXi was benched, right? So that tells me that he's not just being traded to Gamer Legion. Because I immediately go, okay, well, Gamer Legion aren't a terrible team by any stretch of the imagination, right? They obviously had to bring in a couple of newer names. They brought in that Andu kid and they brought in Slend, and we had a look at them over at Pro League. And you wonder who could go to Gamer Legion to fill the void that Snacks is leaving. I thought, mate, you just send HooXi over there. Wouldn't that have made sense? Just chuck him over to Vault,
Gamer
Legion.
Gamer Legion don't really rate him and didn't really care to even pitch that proposition as a trade. And maybe G2 looks at it and says, "There's not a lot of IGLs on the market, so this is actually a pretty valuable piece to hold on to."
Yeah, but he's not going to Liquid. Like, it's too late now. The EWC rosters were locked on the 1st, I'm pretty sure, and I think that the Blast ones are done for the 5th or the 6th. So. You know,
it could still go.
Yeah, I think it.
Well,
I think
unless Liquid drastically changed their plans in 3 days.
Yeah.
I think Gamer Legion is maybe at this point a little bit too much of a step down for HooXi.
But where else would he go?
I mean, he doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere right now. I don't know. And I was going to say, on the other side of things, maybe it's something he would like, to be on a team with more young players, and where everyone just kind of 110% follows what he says, and there's no big names on the team, right? Like more of a Copenhagen Flames atmosphere all over again. Maybe that's something that he would enjoy pursuing. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I'm not really sure where he could go, as you said, like this sort of late in the transfer period, if it's not going to be Liquid.
Fnatic or NIP are options in the future, I would imagine. I don't imagine like right now, but they are teams who would be in the future. You could look at that as an option, I'd say. Like ENCE as well, if it doesn't work out with Glaive. Like those type of teams.
Is there
but Gamer Legion fall into that category?
Is there a potential? Yeah. I mean, if I'm HooXi, I probably have like a list of like 2 to 3 teams in my head that I would go to, that I'd want to explore. And if I don't get any of those, I'm probably sat there and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take like 2 to 3 months off. I'm gonna chill. And
but he probably won't be doing anything until after Shanghai anyway, right?
Yeah.
Or
that's the other hard part.
They just announced their changes, but maybe TSM could have been an option.
Yeah, well, is Valda in-game leading over there?
I'm not sure.
I think
it has to be either him or Nico.
Yeah, and that's okay. So that could be either or. That's definitely a conversation to be had.
And I'd probably take like HooXi over Valde as an in-game leader, like on that team. He's played with Zyphon as well before.
Altex,
something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think like HooXi's in a bit of a tough spot going forward of where like I don't think he'll have anything until after Shanghai, or unless maybe just before Shanghai, right, when teams don't make it or roster changes are happening there. Because to get benched, I think they must have known for a while, because there were some like dirt sheet HLTV forum sleuths that were like, yeah, all the players said welcome Malbs, but HooXi didn't, and all the players did this, but HooXi didn't, so it must be HooXi, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, you guys have actually probably worked it out there, right? So I think I just had that feeling most of the time, because I thought that they were going to go in this Nico in-game leader direction again. So that's the gut punch for me. I was ready to live in that world where we had Twist in-game leading and Nico in-game leading, and now we don't get to live in the world with both of them. It'll just be one. So that's a little bit, but it's a little bit unfortunate, right?
Yeah, I just want to. I didn't like what you said about the Malbs and on this team. I think he shouldn't be the one. You should let him like get most of his spots, because some of the positioning he clashes with Nico, right? But you shouldn't. I think it would be a massive mistake if you just force him to play all of Nexa's roles and positions. I think the people who will need to take a step back is Snacks, obviously, as like first 100%. And foremost, and then Hunter. You see like probably Hunter, like that particular example on Inferno, like you probably have to switch Hunter to but that's like so hard, because he is also a guy who just likes to take space and whatnot. So I don't know if that's where maybe I think the problem is like, I think it's going to end up a combination of, on the T side, like Malbs and Snacks depending on the map, playing HooXi's role, right? And it's going to be a little bit tough to figure out. I don't know, how Snacks is like and how Malbs is like how comfortable they are playing other roles, other positions and whatnot. So it's impossible to tell.
Malbs already plays Banana on both sides of Inferno.
No, he plays Boiler on T, I think.
I think he plays Banana. I mean, look. Either way, I think with his kind of,
I can look at it right now.
Yeah, I have it up on Skybox. I think it's Banana.
It does say Banana.
It says Banana, but I mean, I think that transition, I think, won't be terrible considering how Mulbs likes to play a little bit more aggressive. I think more than anything is going to be getting onto the same page of how Nico likes his protocols, right? In terms of that utility trade game on Banana on both sides of the map. But I mean, yeah.
I just think. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think, okay, let's try and say this. Do you think it'd be better or worse than the old roster?
Better,
but I don't think it's because of. I think it's more because of Mulbs than Snacks, than the leadership change. You know what I mean?
Better because, unfortunately, Nexa was so poor individually that I don't see how it can be worse just on a firepower side. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just how it was, and it was super one-dimensional in the approach, right? And I don't think necessarily that's why for me, I don't think HooXi was the problem because when they had JKS instead of Nexa, they could win shit. And then you also had the drop off of some individuals in CS2, Nico and Hunter most notably, right? Nico was the second best player in the world last year. He didn't play like that in the first couple of months outside of an odd series here and there, right? I don't think there's any disputing that. So I think it's to indict this roster or completely on HooXi, I think it's unfair. Sure, there probably was things that he needed to improve on as well, and just felt like maybe for them, if we're making one change, let's just make two and sort of start off the season fresh.
Yeah, I think it boils down to that, right? Too much residue left over, and then the Stewie situation is the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess, in the sense that they were able to do it without it. I agree with you, Anko. I think that his fragging was not great. I don't think his year started like that, though. I think HooXi's year of fragging actually started better.
It was improved there where it looked improved, yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put the whole thing on him either. I do, people know how I feel about the Nexus situation, So
it's also the curse of being in a leadership position. Like when you are the leader of a team, IGL, captain, coach, you do take more blame than you probably generally deserve, and that's just part of the role that you play for the squad. And that's, I think, what HooXi's curse is more than anything.
Yeah, no, that's kind of just the way that comes with the territory, right? Yeah. You hear Nex is meant to be going to bleed. That's one of the rumors I've read at the moment. Next to bleed for Faven or Farven, depending on how you pronounce that. I want to talk about this liquid stuff, even though I'm not going to say, but I want to talk about it just so people understand how I got this information.
Can you type it in Discord just so I can mentally?
I'll put it in WhatsApp. It's safer in WhatsApp.
Okay.
I don't trust Discord. There you go. So the how I know this is because you guys saw what came out on HLTV regarding the Talon stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the Talon stuff, I've kind of if people listen to this show, they would know this, right? They would know this. I've been advising Talon for a while now, and I tried to get the Greyhound guys initially, and then their buyout was crazy because they all thought they were going to get the sticker money. So then I told Talon not to bother spending that much money on them. We'll just wait, and they won't qualify for the major. And then they didn't qualify for the major, and then tried to get them, and FlyQuest came in. So we missed out on getting them, and they wanted to stay together. And one of the things that they wanted to do was make sure that their roster would stay intact for the rest of the year, essentially. And I said to the Talon guys, I don't think that's a reasonable request. Doesn't feel like a reasonable request to be saying your roster can just stay together regardless of results until the end of the year. And I also think that if an Australian team wants to be able to compete overseas, they need a different AWPer, and that AWPer needs to be a European AWPer. So my advice on that still stays the same, even with the new roster that's being built. So the guys who are together, I haven't been involved as much because now there's a coach and an in-game leader and everything like that involved. So I'm just letting them, handle all that shit. I'm just stepping back now. I've kind of set up the basis for it. And they were looking at all these different AWPers and stuff. And the one that they were close to getting I believe up until like yesterday, then replied and was like, "Oh, I got an offer from a top 10 team, or his management did or whatever," and then he was off the table. So that's how and it has to be Liquid because I think most of the other teams are going to EWC. So Liquid have a little bit longer because of the blast window. So they have a couple more days to try and sort that out. So I think that's what's happened. Like I'm not 100%. I'm like 95%. That would probably be the only other offer that I could see based on the stuff that I got to read of where he would be looking to go. It's an interesting name, but I don't know when we'll get to talk about that. I don't know when Liquid will announce that. So I don't want to have this like talking around in circles while the listener doesn't know and we're all kind of talking code and all that type of shit. And I don't want to give away any clues or anything. So I just wanted to make it clear on how I obtained that information. So,
I mean, this aside, if we just focus on the Liquid side of things, like, wouldn't it? If you're Liquid, wouldn't you look at HooXi now that he's available? Like, wouldn't you have the
I
conversation?
feel it's too
real
late
quick?
though.
Is it? Is it too late or is it almost too late?
I think it's too late.
I think it's too late, not because they can't get done the logistics, but because it feels like Twist has just made his mind up that he wants to do it this season. You know, like
What makes you think that though?
I don't know, just like
Like, was there an interview, or is it just kind of like the sense of them not?
Just the sense of some of the things like you could hear behind the scenes of what was going on in Liquid and how much was Twist taking up some of the responsibilities and so on, and then also seeing like that there's not a clear like I'm not saying that Twists wouldn't play under HooXi necessarily, but I think it's a bit of building the roster properly if you're going to do that. And if they can't do that, he'd rather just for a season in-game lead himself and see how that goes for him, just also individually, right? Because as we talked about, Liquid probably can't get like some big names right now. Like they have to get a couple of stopgap solutions for this next major cycle and just sort of hope for the best because, as we said, the market is dry a little bit. They also spend already a lot of money or a good amount of money for skulls for Cadian, where it's like, okay, it's unrealistic to just keep doing that.
Yeah. I think Twist will be in game leading this season for Liquid, and I understand that you're trying to bring this to the table. Look, from everything I understand, I believe that's going to be the case, Jason.
It's such a big risk when you think about it in the context of they're like through all these struggles, how good Twist continued to perform for them despite all the issues. And
he was already playing in-game leader positions though for them during that time.
If you take that off the positions without the responsibility, and once you add the responsibility, it comes into a whole new thing. I've said this
before. He had the responsibility. He was doing the things an in-game leader would do when Cadian was in the roster. I
know that too. Outside the server, outside of a live match environment.
So, but he already had the he already had the stress of doing all of that stuff before getting into the server anyway, right? Like, am I saying that he will frag just as hard as he would have before? Am I saying he'd frag it as hard as he could if he wasn't the in-game leader? No, I'm not saying those things. But I'm saying that I don't think it's going to impact the approach that you saw from him in the game when Cadian was in the roster to now when he's in-game leading, because he's going to be doing the same stuff. And the biggest issue is going to be this AWP player that I've mentioned, not having much experience. If they bring in a fifth that is experienced, then the rest of the roster is going to be quite experienced, right? Yakinda would be the next one that I would be saying who would probably be the next least experienced within the team. And then what it's going to need to be is it's going to need to be done by a committee. And also, one of the things that we haven't been talking much about is who the coach is going to be at that team, which I have absolutely no idea. I don't even know who's potentially on the market to be a coach over at Liquid, right, to assist in those issues, because that's going to be another big problem for them to have to solve. So I don't think that, I think that he may as well give it a crack. That's where I'm at with it. And I thought the same thing about Nico. So maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe in a couple of days' time, it'll be like, and Liquid signed HooXi. And I'm like, okay, well, that came from nowhere. But something else that I think you need to keep in mind, Jason, as Jason, the American O'Toole, if they brought HooXi in and their AWP player is European, then they would no longer be able to get an American spot. And you seem to think that that is very, very valuable for them.
Yeah,
so
it is very valuable for them.
Okay, so with that in mind, then they were not going to get HooXi.
Yeah, I mean, the offer changes things. I didn't have the information on the offer for sure, but that's where I would think that could be. I mean, if they've already signed the offer, then it's not even really a conversation. But that's where I would have thought, all of a sudden having an IGL who's won Katowice and Cologne, who's won trophies, questionable in some senses, but I think that would have been a talking point for. I figured that would have been a talking point if he all of a sudden became available for a team that needs an IGL and brings that experience. And I mean, allows you to dodge the plethora of obstacles that you just laid out for a brand new IGL to step in, regardless of how many responsibilities he had outside the server with Cadian as the IGL. I think the exponential increase of responsibility comes when you actually have to be calling those things in the moment for your team.
I think they'll be in a better position if there's less stress and less is it discontent?
Yeah, discontent amongst each other's for sure.
If they actually like each other and there's a better team atmosphere, I think that that we could get even more out of twists. Because one of the things that I think people need to keep reminding themselves about this guy, and this is why I think there's so much fear about it, is he's only 24. So he still has a long time to play, and he's already been playing at the top of Counter-Strike for the last, 5 years?
7 or 8 years.
So,
7 years.
Right? Well, yeah, but
24 years.
The liquid time and then the phase time, I'm counting as like the top time for him, right? So that is like last 5 or 6
I joined
years,
Liquid
yeah.
in 17. He was playing, yeah.
Yeah, but they were great in 2018.
Yeah.
Well, no, they were great in 2019. They were good in 2018. And then phase stuff coming after that. So I think that's one of the concerns is his age, and could this really tarnish him and what he's able to accomplish? Or I'm going to be hopefully optimistic about Mr. Russell Van Dolken, and it'll be the opposite, and he'll turn out to be the best thing since fucking sliced bread or maple syrup because he's Canadian.
I'm cool with that too. I would love that outcome. I just have a tough time seeing it through everything at the moment.
I wanted to be in the star era of in-game leaders where Device was doing it, Nico was doing it, Twist was doing it, and then Duncan, I did a show with him and Maniac the other day for Counterpoints, and he was like, yeah, could you picture if like all these in-game leaders like HooXi, Snappy, everybody, they're just sitting on the sideline and they just got these shit teams while these stars are in-game leading like star-studded rosters. It'd be fucking mental. But I think Liquid get a grace period, right? They don't have to go and play EWC because they didn't qualify. So they don't have to worry about doing anything until the 26th. Not until the 26th. 26 more days. The 29th of July is so they can practice a week or two before that, and still be all good. They can literally return from the break as the break ends. Whereas everybody else, I think like your Vitalities, your G2s, your Phases, they'll have to start getting back into practice as of this week, and then probably just soft practice. Hey guys, get some facets in, get back in deathmatch. We'll play a couple of scrims together or whatever. And the next week, I imagine you hit it hard and try and do the best you can for EWC because what is it, 400 grand first prize. But I think one of the other keys is for these teams who are part of like super orgs, so orgs who have almost teams in every game, it means a lot for EWC in terms of how that whole kind of thing is structured with prize money and everything. So they'll probably be pushing for their players to come back early, I would imagine.
It's 7 million if you get first place in like the organization competition at EWC.
7 million.
7 million is first. I think like 3 or 4 million is second. I think even like fifth, sixth gets like 1 to 2 million each.
Yeah, okay. So they're definitely throwing
very
stupid
important
money around.
EWC.
Yeah.
I think though I think that's the it's Twists and Eco, IGL, whatever. Now, next year, next season, I think that's the next big shift.
Jump.
Yes, in like the meta, because like let's say I think it's a similar thing to what we see, for example, in basketball, where when Golden State was the best, all of a sudden it's shooters and small ball and whatnot, and then that becomes dominant, and other teams try to copy it, right? And that's how you build your roster. Then we see Denver do it with Jokic, and then Minnesota built to like try to beat them, and you see these shifts, and then other people kind of have to try and do it that way because you'll just be left behind the curve. So I think obviously Astralis is the first one that we see with Device picking it up in that sense, and it's been a little bit up and down this first season for them. But okay, now they have
down, didn't it?
Yeah, now they have the break, and they'll have time to sort of make the adjustments that they feel they need to make after those first couple of months and Device's first foray into in-game leading. So that's going to be an interesting thing to follow in the second half of the year. But absolutely, man, I mean, that's the next step, because if you have on one team, whatever, Carrigan and Snappy as the in-game leaders, and on the other you have Nico and Twist. I mean, that just on average, when it comes to the skill level, creates a pretty big disparity.
Do you think this is a new kind of overall shift in the meta of how to put a team together? Like
it
more
will be. I mean,
if skilled individuals rather than like an overall team strategy.
Well, it will be because
hand.
Yes, because you also look at, as we said, like Nico wants to win more trophies, right? So if, let's say, he feels like he's at a point where he wants to take up in-game leading, when all of a sudden that team, if they, don't bring in Nexa to be the anchor, can be on average like much stronger than the opponents, right? They have more firepower, you have more skill. Every player on your team is skilled. Every player on your team has good game sense, can make his own decisions and whatnot, which should allow you to play on a much higher level, because you have no weaklings. You have no, oh shit, if it's this guy like alone on the side, you're sort of worried a little bit and you're going to cheat over potentially in rotation. So I think, yeah, you're going to have to look in. I think it's not necessarily, it's not like as a team you can do that. Like you can't go to, I don't know, Frozen and say, hey, Frozen, you need to start team game leading. Like, no, but I think it's going to be more of a mental switch for players that are in that position, right? Like that we think maybe are set or think like that already, or want to do it in the future. It might just get them to do it a little bit earlier. Let's say if someone like EHH wants to do it, right? Like that's a name that potentially, like, you could be like, okay, this guy could be an in-game leader and he's still very good, very skilled. So that would allow you to build a really good team around them.
I agree with the sentiment, Yanko, because we're past the point of in-game leading like back in the day where you used to have to micromanage every round, right? You'd have set strategies, but mid-rounding was only something which really came like with all the top teams doing it, and then that bred into the way that Luminosity would do all their theory and stuff, right? So they would be talking about, how are we going to react in all these different situations? And then now in the modern game, with the refinement that Astralis brought to the game in terms of how utility is used, the trading of that to take space or do damage, or timings of when to block, for example. Now you have that at such a high level where every player on every team, if they want to be considered one of the best teams in the world, need to understand all of these details. Now you still have a puppet master who's calling against another puppet master and trying to like do different in terms of tone, right? How fast are we going to play? Okay, let's do a fake, let's do this, let's do that. But I think the thing is, those type of brains are the brains who are going to become the better coaches or analysts who can just provide these game plans before, and then the team of higher skilled individuals who already have to have all this theory and knowledge can go out there and execute on it. And the biggest issue is going to be having to innovate on the fly. And that's where I think we'll slowly start to see more and more value come out of coaches in these timeouts, to actually take a timeout and make that change and use it preemptively, as opposed to reacting after something's already gone wrong, right? They're seeing the flow of the game. They see where this is going. They see how the game plan they came in is matching up against how the other team is playing, and then making those adjustments and being able to do so for multiple rounds. Because you can't be going into a game at high-level Counter-Strike and the in-game leader needs to call how you're going to take the long control on Dust 2, right? Like if you need to make a slight adjustment, okay, I want you to go for this type of pathing because they're doing this, that's fine, right? But the players need to be accountable enough, I think, in this year of Counter-Strike, and especially going forward into the next decade of Counter-Strike, to be able to adjust and make these decisions on their own. And that's just going to come back to what people do in traditional sports, watching enough tape, having these conversations, refining the way that they approach the game. And I think that it is going to be personality types. Like, I agree with what Yanko's saying. It is going to be certain players who we look at and we go, that guy has a leader aura about him, to use the buzzword at the moment, right? And those players if they can still do that while having the team that all buy in and contribute. That's the biggest thing. You can't have any of these fucking emo cunts that still, some of them exist around Counter-Strike, and they shut down and they don't comment, they don't do. You can't have those guys. Like, Counter-Strike's not going to work like that. When you go into a game, everybody needs to be contributing and trying to solve the puzzle, taking accountability and fixing things as the game is going to get the best result. And I think, yeah, Yanko, you're onto it. That will likely be the next shift because it is the skill disparity in some of these situations that makes the difference. When we're watching a game of CS, that multi-kill, that 2-kill that where maybe someone would only get 1, that's a difference maker in games. Those are the key moments.
Yeah, and I think for coaches and the staff, like your job is just to give the players the tools to unlock like their potential in a sense of like what their style is and what they're good at. Give them the tools to get into those situations, and then they will convert, right? Like it's up to them to convert and to build on that. You can't just expect, because you have good players who even are like experienced and have good game sense, you can't just give them complete freedom, right? Because then it's a little bit too chaotic. And if you give them absolute freedom, they won't really know what to do with it either, right? Like it has to be freedom within the confines of a structure and a system, right? Okay, so my players are really good at, let's say, making mid-round decisions, and we're really good at situational Counter-Strike. We're bad, like, I diminish their advantages if we play just slow, and we end up having to face a lot of utility late in the round. Like, I don't want that. So what do you do then? You have aggressive openings of rounds where you're willing to trade a good amount of your utility for their utility. So you make like the mid and late round less utility based and more sort of putting pressure on the individuals that they don't have support in terms of utility and whatnot. And that they will feel a little bit uncomfortable, which will make them maybe more prone to rotate and to move, and then you can abuse that, right? And you want to maybe isolate, some 1v1s on the side of the map because you feel like you have superior players on that side or whatnot, and that's what you need to do. That's how that's what you do. Like, you need to think about first thing when you have your roster is like, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses, and how do we play more towards our strengths, and how do we try to, hide our weaknesses or have them not be exploited too much, right? And that's all there is. And then you just need to be creative about the way you do it, in a sense of that it's not easy to read for your opponent, and you have to do things, have to throw in a couple of things that are different just to have that change of pace and whatnot, and be able to play a couple of different styles. And that's all there is to it, right? But you can't just be like, I had a team with Cold, Nico, and Olof, Rain, right, and Brokey, okay, who was a rookie then. But between Cold, Nico, and Olof, you have 3 guys who know more or less everything there is to know about how to play CS individually and situationally. Like, what's the best move in this after plant, like they were all on the same page about that stuff. But when it's 5v5 and we need to plant the bomb and get into the after plant and do some of that stuff, like that's where you come in as a coach and build the game in a way that's going to put them in that situation in the end. And then Nico and Cold are going to win a 2v4 because that's just how good they are. Olaf is going to win a 1v2 or a 1v3, or Brokey and Cold were really good in clutches, and I mean, still Brokey still is. So that's all you need to do. And then people still watch, people watching gets up, oh, look how many of these rounds like FaZe would win, or even in game. Yeah, but that's what they do. That's not by accident. Like that's not, oh, they were lucky and they did that. It's like those situations, they're not disadvantageous in them. Like that's where they're at least even, or they feel a lot of the times, yeah, we're winning this round, like we're clutching this.
Yeah, one of their strengths as a team. That's like one of the things they get to lean on that others can't.
It was even about Snax himself that Thorin said ages ago, right, when VP was at its peak, and he was talking to some player after VP beat, and we lost like, oh, that round where Snax backstabbed us, or where he had this clutch. Is like, there's a long line of of teams that have that same excuse, right? Like that's just what makes him who he is, right? Same thing about all these teams. Like there's a reason why they're peaking when they are.
I think some of the most valuable pieces in Counter-Strike right now, like if I was to list a couple of them, because of essentially what we're talking about right now, like Blade would be at the top of that conversation. These like Carrigan is essentially right now a playing coach, because think about when Carrigan eventually decides that he's going to transition from being a player into being a coach. Think about how valuable as a coach that guy is going to be.
Oh, he'll
like,
be
it
the
is going to
hottest
be
prospect
absolutely
out there.
It'd be fucking insane. And I think he's the type of guy that would be able to sit down with the roster and go, all right, like we need a captain in the server to make these type of decisions and calls and stuff, but we don't need somebody in the same vein as Carrigan, right? Like you don't need a player to fill that 1-for-1. You'll be able to do it in a different vein.
And I think it was Carrigan who even said it at a podcast, one of the ESL ones that we do at the championship events. I think it was in Katowice, where he was just like, he even just straight up said like, there's going to be a new evolution. Like when you see, like we have a good current crop of coaches, but when you see the players who are competing right now start to retire and switch into coaching, it's going to take everything to a new level. Like he's anticipating that the coaches of today's game, or like the players of today's game becoming coaches, brings the next generation up like 2 steps.
Well, it's going to have to, because when you think about the game right now in terms of the refinement, everybody still remembers what Astralis did regarding utility, right? And that's something that everybody's still running with to this day. I think the fact that we're in CS2 and there's still little tweaks going on every now and again is something which might keep things evolving, but ever so slightly. People with the smokes are not using that as optimally as they could, but that's something that will come over time as well. But I don't imagine how much of an impact that's gonna have. But otherwise, what other massive change of the game can there possibly be? We're not in the era where set strats are more dominant or defaulting is like the style at the moment is obviously very default heavy, but you need to have good pace changes. You need to have set pieces. You need to be able to execute mid round from different variations. So you have to have everything now is essentially my point.
Yeah. And I don't think that's changing. Like I think that's the way you have to play.
I guess the next biggest evolution in Counter-Strike would be if we ever. Well, I don't even know if it'd be. I can't even really call it an evolution, but I guess like the next point where if we get new maps, like brand new maps in Counter-Strike, right? That might be the next
solve that
biggest
puzzle
shift.
the quickest. Yeah.
And like which team has the best tactical understanding to be able to identify how to play a map better, and then the question becomes, if there's ever a map rotation, like if we ever get into a situation where Valve is like, there's going to be 1 new map every single year, 2 new maps every single year, then there's more value on having like a strategic brain as a coach, as an IGL, as a player within the team than there is at the moment, which is kind of just like we're still playing maps that have been sort of figured out for the most part.
Okay, so the first part of what you said is, the second part is, I like that. The first part is kind of shit. I don't want that. So first, let's just focus on that. Okay, so I think it's fine. It would be good, I think, to have 5 maps that are always in the pool, and then 2 maps that rotate every season.
Every season or every year?
5 permanent maps.
Yes.
Every season or every year?
And then the last 2 maps are well, maybe that's a problematic because then you could just veto one
of the 2.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So maybe you would like find a way to rotate them where.
I like 1 a year. 1 a year is still good.
1 a year?
1 a year.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, that's maybe a little bit. That's maybe too little for me.
I mean, the hard part is, as we saw when they brought in new maps in the past, it takes like a year for the changes to come to the maps to make.
Yeah, actually, I'm with you, Chad. 1 a year is fine, and here's the reason why I don't want it to be more than that, and why I don't want it to be what Jason said is I don't want it to turn into some gimmicky sort of shit.
I don't want it that way. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah. But where people are just like, because also the problem isn't about these maps necessarily. The biggest problem with a new map early on, I don't think is like figuring out what works really good on the map and what not. Like we can still see that Anubis now compared to when it came out is it's the same in a sense of that the T's understand that the map favors them and with a slow style, and as they take map control, like they're going to be fine. And there's a couple of pace changes in there towards B or towards A and whatnot, and people are obviously getting more creative with it over time. The bigger change is the fact that the CTs understand they need to be a lot more aggressive, even though it's maybe counterintuitive to how they play CT side on different maps, but that they need to approach Anubis differently. I think the bigger problem is, and it takes time to, like, all the angles, like the micro stuff on the map is like, I think where it takes more time to develop, and that's just a little bit annoying for the players, figuring out all the positions, where is it good to stand, where is it not, what setups, and that sort of a thing. So I don't want it. I still stick to what I said like ages ago, where I think the new change, like the meta is going to be positionless players in a sense of where you can just, because right now we know how much of the T side evolves around the kill feed. And who did you kill? Oh, we killed the B anchor. Let's just speed up B. You know, there's max one more
That's
guy
another good
there,
one.
right? So if you're able to deny your opponents that information, but by playing a lot more fluid,
Your anchors become switch hitters. You know, like if they get the best B spawn, they take B. If they get the best A spawn, they take A. Imagine that. Like your anchors are just able to mix it out like that.
Yeah,
Fluid
exactly.
CT sides, yeah.
And you just do it that way. And that way, you know, if you kill Nico on B Inferno, you can't be like, that's the B player. Just like we killed one guy who's there at that point, right? Like that would make the T side a lot more difficult. And I think even for starters, you can even do it just within their roles, right? So the pit guy and the B anchor, they just, depending on what round it is, they switch around.
I feel like that's an evolution that we've kind of teased and touched on for years, like waiting to see teams start to really test that, and we haven't really seen it.
These are things. These are probably like big things, like in sense of you might see adjustments to these over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't imagine this is going to happen in the immediate future, right? And it will take a trend setter, like a team, to get to a point. It definitely could, right? I think Dust 2 is a prime example.
It's not some crazy in-depth thing.
Well, I think it is in depth because the workload that you'd have to do, right? If you're the best pit anchor in the world, you have different qualities in that position than what you need to be the best B anchor in the world, right? Like, and just the library of utility that you need to know. I think if you're going to execute B on the T side, then everybody would know the CT and coffins and the basic smokes and flashes, right? Everybody would have a good understanding of that. And if not, you can drop that. But as an anchor in a position, to be able to know like the best defensive smoke that I can drop or the best timing for this, those are things that are going to only come with reps, right? So a lot of these guys are quite specialized in those positions. But I think for certain maps, like Dust 2, for example, if you're not using the best spawn that you get to try and deny long space, then you have to change your variations of how you're going to get long control on the CT side. And then if you're never getting the best spawns with one or two of your players who take that, or maybe it's your AWPer every time, so he goes to pick the corner, but they have this, they'd always go a corner smoke, so your AWPer gets negated. Like, there's all these different things that could play into it. So I think to get there, it would be possible. It would require a lot of work. I think that there are qualities that are the same in terms of survivability or getting a multi-kill, right? But in terms of how you go from getting from point A of that understanding to point B of that as the result, there is going to have to be a lot of work done in between the two, right? If I'm an anchor in a pit position right now in Inferno, I'm going to watch other best anchors in the world in that position. And then, but now imagine you have to do that for A and B. And then you have to do that across 6 maps. So, you know, it's more work, a lot more work. Yeah. All right.
But
should we go?
Yeah,
keep going?
I was just wondering if there's maybe like a couple of questions we want to answer.
Oh yeah, was there anything in there?
I think there was. I like the one from Scoopster where it's like, what's been your favorite team to watch throughout CS history?
Throughout CS history, I guess it would have to. For me,
let's
right?
let's stick to CSGO and CS2.
Yeah, for me, it would have to be FaZe. I just think they have consistently provided the most entertaining Counter-Strike based on the style that they play. They've always been aggressive. They back their aim, and that always creates exciting matches, right? Quality games that are back and forth, high-skilled individuals with very high understanding and always doing, a consummate job in stage matches, which is where the best Counter-Strike is played. So I think FaZe is like the easy cop-out answer, but I went first, so I'm going to take it.
Jason?
Rat fuck. Dude, I used to love watching the old VP squad, the old like the Virtus Plow, the Polish VP. I fucking loved that. For so many reasons. I thought Snacks was a super exciting player at the time, like really kind of showed off how to play around smokes and how you could actually use smokes to kind of disappear and just be annoying as fuck. I thought that was one of like the few teams that we've had in the history of Counter-Strike where it felt like their gameplay matched their personalities and the kind of attitude that they brought in. And just with them, it was always kind of like the question was always like, will they hit that Plow level, or are they going to like be disappointing? And like, you know, hard team to put away, but some games they would come in and just fucking wreck you and it'd be amazing. Their time from execution to bomb site was low. I loved so many qualities about that old Polish VP squad. I thought they were fun as fuck.
Yeah, for me, it's been... I really liked Luminosity when they broke out because they also had like this different style and the patience and like the late rounds, and then also, you know, Fallen in his prime, Cold Zera, even FNX with his clutches and shit. Like that was fun to watch, but also Astralis, man, because it's just a machine, you know, and like they're just suffocating as a team, and just how good they were at Team Counter-Strike. I mean, they revolutionized the game in that sense, how every piece of utility made sense, and it was thrown with a purpose, and you had players who, you know, weren't considered the best in their role, probably any of them, right? But as a unit, they were by far the best. So that was really impressive.
They were fun to watch them for like different reasons, right? Like
They weren't like
the most exciting Counter-Strike, but like the beauty of Counter-Strike. They
my reasons were different to Chad's reasons. Like the way we picked it were like a different thought process. But here's a good one for you, Chad. I mean, that you would probably like. On a scale of HooXi to Donk, how would the three of you fare if you trained and played in today's Tier 1 circuit?
Fucking much closer to HooXi than Donk.
HooXi side of things.
Yeah. If I was having games that were slightly better than HooXi, I'd be pretty happy with that. That would make me happy. But I think, what am I, 34? I don't think I'll be hanging.
I'm not sure if he means like if our prime was now, or if we like try to play now.
4 months to train right now.
Yeah.
I think either way, right? But I think one of the things that I am quite envious of at the moment is the way that Counter-Strike gets to be played, and the understanding that your players need to have to play the game, right? You can't be the one from whatever position you're playing on the map on the CT side having to make the micro decisions for your teammates to take space. And back in the day, when you would get essentially just defaulted on train, for example, and the map would just get smaller and smaller and smaller as you'd be flashed off every angle, and the amount of moves and stuff we'd have back when I was playing, we didn't have enough that were good enough to respond. And I think that was essentially everybody playing the game, right? It wasn't as in depth as it is now, and that's one thing I'm a bit more envious of as a leader, is getting to instill all of that in your team and then play knowing that your team understands how you want them to react in those moments. Because I feel that once that job is done, you have a lot less pressure in having to think for everybody, and you get to actually focus on shooting more, which is always a really nice feeling as an in-game leader.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I think I'd be a bot. So yeah. Yeah, I'm playing a decent amount at the moment, but I'd still be
How's
a
it
bot.
going? You getting some aces out there?
Today I got tilted as fuck. We lost to Forest and Olaf and stuff, and we should have won. I just like Harry missing some util really tilted me off the face of the earth early.
Oh, no.
I was fucking gone earlier. I couldn't get back in the game until it was too late. So we still ended up taking them to overtime, and then I almost clutched a 1v4 to take us to double OT, but I lost to Forest. And just a shout out to Olaf and Forest, both green skin abusers on Ancient.
Get them. Call them out.
Yeah. Wouldn't expect that from those type of guys, but apparently,
I don't know.
green
Olaf
skin
was part of
abusers.
that Fnatic roster back in the day. You know? It was
Wow.
just,
Holy moly. Shots fired from Jason there.
huge shots fired.
Do you have some
What else
sort of
is
a
there?
saying? They're like a wolf sheds its hair, something like that. You don't have that in English.
Could you complete the saying in some regard?
Wait.
A wolf in sheep's clothing?
That's the closest we have. That's what I was thinking too.
Let me see. Yeah, it's not that. No, if I were to translate it directly, I never heard this in English. It would be a wolf changes his hair, but never the character. That's not like a fucking.
A leopard can't change its spots?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
about
I
the
guess
closest
that's
we got,
that would be the one. That would be a good one.
different.
Yeah,
angles,
I think
but
that's it.
Same concept.
I think we can just do one more that I saw, which was, and this we could do. The guy even said like, this is probably a segment, maybe not a question, but a segment. But like with no international teams being the norm, how would a national team ranking look like?
Oh, so what would be the best team in the world?
Yeah, I think, bro, Russia number one.
Yeah.
Fucking
You just
straight
take
up.
Zontix out and you put Perfecto in or something, and there you go. You're laughing. There's so many possibilities with Russian players. But then after that,
Yeah, that's the easy one. I think what happens after.
Denmark would probably be after that.
Denmark, yeah.
Denmark.
And then
And then Mongolia.
Yeah, because you could have a couple of good Danish rosters, I'd say.
And then Mongolia.
Actually, not a bad shout. You may as well throw Turkey in there.
Or Israel.
Yeah,
would
actually,
be like low key,
Yeah.
like pretty good one.
Brazil would make the top 10 if it was just national teams.
Yeah, definitely. If they could actually get without the buyouts and all that shit, they could just play. It could be pretty good.
Are you going to put
Canada
the new
will-
intro on? You going to put the new intro on this week, Jason, that Harry did?
Yeah, I'll put his in there. I gotta go find it.
That's
and
really
I'll-
good.
I'll sync it up. That'll take us to 6:00 announcement.
All right.
Yeah,
I think that's enough of the questions and everything.
All right. Well,
Snacks
Another
era.
episode about roster changes.
it's been great.
All right, goodbye.
Get some snacks.
Yeah.